Oh my gosh. Katelynn, it worked. They actually let us have control of this thing. We are on. Oh my gosh. I feel like the minions have taken control and we are just going to run rampant right now and have a whole lot of fun. Are you so excited?
I am so thrilled right now.
I got to tell you, complete honesty, I'm a little nervous. I'm always intimidated sharing a screen with you. I really am. I get nervous because I think you are so stinking brilliant. And I feel like you're going to I don't know, make me melt here, which is totally fine. I hope people get tremendous value from everything that you share. But I'm super excited, but scared. I'm scared, but it's okay.
OMG.
I'll make it through. Yeah. Apparently you don't feel the same way sharing a screen with me, which is fine, because that would have been the perfect time for you, Katelynn, to say, no, me too. But you were just like, oh, wow.
No, Dave, it's funny you say that because I'm like, okay, I feel the same way, but hearing you, like Dr. Dave Schmittou, like I read your books, like have followed you for years, you're intimidated to share a screen with me? Like, what?
Well, to be honest, that just sounded creepy, what you just said. So not, I'm teasing. This is going to be fun. So for those of you just joining us, this is Focus on the Focus. Week 1, we'll be talking a lot about grading, some assessment, how to establish priorities, how to determine what's worth the fight and what's not worth the fight. And Lord knows you and I like to fight. So tonight we're going to be doing a lot of talk about grading. So just a second, I'm going to launch the little promo intro thing that'll give people about 50 seconds to grab a drink, grab a pen and paper, grab their friends and neighbors, gather around the computer screen, just like in the old days, and check out Focus on the Focus. You ready, Katelynn?
I'm ready.
All right, everybody. You got 52 seconds. We'll see you soon. All right, Katelynn. I know I just said I was nervous, and I was being dead serious. I was nervous. But then when that intro was going and I remembered I'm supposed to be like watching the comments here and clicking the comments and saying how many people are watching this right now, I'm terrified right now. I'm seeing like these people that I adore. We've got Carrie joining us. Woohoo! Carrie is here in the house. We got Brian joining us, ready to have a great conversation about grading. The one and only Ray Hewart is in the house. Now I'm really scared, right? I know. We got Nikki Jacoby here. We've got infamous Facebook user. Hello, Facebook user. Love that. We got Mel joining us from down in Central America. Like we are international right now. That's awesome. Another Facebook user that's excited. We got Kate. Just so many people right now are here. And I know that they are all here for you, Katelynn.
Oh, no.
Megan is here as well saying, hey. So people, if you are here, after you say your hellos to us, make us feel calm and comfortable. We want to let you know that this is a conversation. Katelynn and I have some things that we have to say, some things that we're like bubbling over and we want to get out, but we also want to be able to answer your questions. So if you've got questions, throw them in the comments. We've had quite a few people hit us up already today with questions that they want us to tackle. They've sent us direct messages on Twitter and Instagram and all the places. And we'll share in just a minute what some of those questions were. And then ultimately we're going to just jump in and have some fun talking grading. So,
yes.
Whew. So Katelynn, we got 5 weeks of this. Are we going to be able to maintain this stamina for 5 weeks?
Oh my gosh, yes. I cannot tell you. This is one of the most exciting things I've gotten to do with Teach Better is getting to go live with you for 5 weeks. Like, right. Yes.
I agree. You know, I think this kind of started off as one of those accidents where they were planning the 12-hour live and they said, let's throw Dave and Katelynn together and see what happens. And then I'll be honest, I told Jeff, don't ever break us up. Every time I can hang out with Katelynn, please let me do it. And then a couple of weeks ago, they invited us on to do that bonus episode on the podcast. And that kind of like primed my pump and just got me super stoked to do this. So I'm ready.
Yes. Well, it's funny you say that you told Jeff that, because I think I told Jeff or Ray something very similar. I was like, if Dave's doing it, I'll say yes. So they were like, okay.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's set the stage. Grading. Focus on the focus. First of all, it's a funky title. I know Mel here, who's watching us, keeps saying focus on the focus? Question mark. Like, what is that? And I know it's even a conversation we've kind of had. Focus on the focus. I'll let you tackle what you think that title is all about, and then I can jump in with any clarification that I think might be necessary. You want to go first? Focus on the focus?
Yeah, definitely. So it is kind of a funky topic, but the whole point behind what we're trying to do here is have this conversation about how when we try to take on new initiatives, especially when it comes to grading and assessment, we can get really bogged down with so much. There's so many different pieces that go into making this kind of change, especially with a system like grading that's been so entrenched for so many years that the people that are doing it and upholding it now aren't even entirely sure why they're doing it. So it becomes a conversation about something that's so much bigger than just points and percentages in your classroom or in your school or in your district. And so our whole idea with like focus on the focus is really making sure we're jumping in and focusing in on, yes, grading, but also on how to make that real structural change in a way that works for kids, for teachers, for administrators, for districts.
Ooh. Yeah, I shouldn't have let you go first. That's not fair. That's going to be the last time I let that happen, because then I got to follow what you said and like try to add some more value to that. I think you nailed it. You were very focused on the focus. You know, I jokingly said to you before we started, ironically, I'm super nervous tonight because I don't know that I'm going to be able to stay focused. And I feel like there's 1,000 different things I want to say, but that we have a script, we have an agenda for the next 5 weeks. We're going to try to stay true to the conversation topics we have set, because that is part of the message we want to send. I was talking to a friend yesterday in Illinois, actually, who was talking through some grading reform practices. And I told this friend, I said, it's interesting. A lot of the work that I get to do is with districts that started grading reform a year or two ago. And they thought, oh, this will be easy. And they think we've got it all solved. And then a year or two in, they're like, oh my gosh, we don't know what we're doing. All we did was we opened up the rug, looked underneath and thought we swept a lot of dirt underneath there that we now need to uncover. And that's kind of the mess that starts happening when you start talking grading, assessment, and data. So we are going to try to be focused on the focus and trying to identify those priorities. What are the things that need to be talked about? What are those first steps, the next steps, the last steps, so that we can try to give everybody some support in starting the journey, completing the journey, continuing the journey, wherever you are. We want to give you some help and support. So that's the idea of focus on the focus. Identify that priority and go all in. And today our focus is really just the big conversation about grades and
Like,
what do they mean, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is a grade, Katelynn?
Okay, so for anybody that doesn't know, I am a 6th grade teacher. So I am in the classroom every single day. And it is something that I feel like we really need to start. And that's why I was so excited that we were starting with this particular topic and this particular question. Not just because we do have to define it beforehand, but because it's the question that you have to be asking yourself if you are trying to make this kind of change or go into doing this work. What is a grade? Like, what are we talking about here? And it's really diving into the purpose behind, like, okay, so what is a grade supposed to do? Not what is it currently doing, because that's a whole conversation that we definitely should have, but what is it supposed to be doing? Because that's the way that we need to be thinking about our future steps and our future goals. What is our aim here? What is our purpose in doing this work? What do we want to do when we're giving grades? What are we trying to do there?
Yeah, and I'm glad you started off with just telling people who you are and what you do. That should have been something we did right away. So thanks for bringing me back to that focus, because I think that is important to set the stage before we start talking about some of our ideas and our plans. Let's set the stage and tell people who we are, what we do. And honestly, if it's okay, before we even start talking about what we should do, maybe even unpack a little bit about the things that we did and some of our own awakenings and some of the changes that took place from us. Because as I look at the screen, I know I am the older statesman of the two of us. I've been around the block a little bit longer. I might have been doing this a little bit longer. And that means I made a lot more mistakes than you. I did not make the transition to the grading reform and the grading practices that I believe in now, probably as early in my career as you did. So do you want, I will let you go first one more time. Do you want to just tell people again, you said sixth grade teacher, unpack that a little bit more. Who are you? Where are you? What do you do? And then we'll talk about mistakes we made.
So I'm Katelynn Giordano, for those of you that haven't met me or are new friends here tonight. I hope there's some. I am a sixth grade teacher in Illinois, just outside of Chicago. I have taught in the middle school setting for the last 7 years. So it's been a crazy ride. I also am the director of curriculum and instruction for the Teach Better team. Got a new title. What's up? And I do a lot of really cool stuff in education. It's fun for me to kind of just be involved in this work and in this world outside of just my classroom. So that has been the goal that I've had for the last few years, to kind of take my reach a little bit bigger.
That's cool. And for people that don't know me, I am Dave Schmittou. Again, been here a lot longer. I am in year 21 of official education. In that time, I've been a classroom teacher, a middle school teacher. I have also been a middle school principal and assistant principal. I've been an elementary principal. I've been an assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction, a professor of higher ed, and I also get to hang out with Teach Better people all the time. My cool fancy title is Director of Leadership and Development. But honestly, this is the most passionate I have ever been in my job, is now being able to share with people the messages that I have that are truly rooted in the mistakes that I made. I feel like at times I'm like the dad to a lot of teachers where I say, don't do what I did back in my day. Here's what I did, and don't do that. But honestly, I think there at times there's wisdom to say, here's what I did, and here's what I wish I would have known. There's going to be a lot of conversations today, a lot of opening up in transparency when we admit some of the things that we may have done or thought. And I'm doing it for a couple reasons. One, just to be honest and real, so that people don't look at me and think that I think I know all things, because I don't. I'm hoping people will push back on some of the things that we present and some of our ideas. But I'm also sharing it because I want other people to hopefully find some commonalities in our stories. And if I talk about some things that I might have done 10, 15, 20 years ago that you might still be doing, or that your district or your school is telling you have to do, you can at least hear the stories of the transformation and the transition, so that you can hopefully have some hope that can happen for you as well.
Definitely. So I think that's a really big thing to just make sure that people know, like, first and foremost, like, Dave and I's goal in any kind of conversation we have, including this one that we're having now, is not to make people believe what we believe, or to sit here and tell you, like, we know how to do this, like, we know what we're talking about. It's definitely not that. We both have made these kinds of transitions, and we both have had these mindsets that aren't anywhere near where we are now. And so it's not just a here's one way to do this, or here's the right way to do this. It's very much, here's the journey that we both went on. And there are some commonalities. There are some things that we found that we've really both agreed on, but there's also some things that we haven't, or that we found a different way to, or we may approach in a different way. And I feel like that's powerful as well. So especially when you're talking about something that like grading, it can be very personal, and people can have very strong opinions about it. So it's important to know, like, just being here today, being with us in this conversation, means that you want to do more. You want to do better. You're looking for that change to happen. And so we're here, we're with you, because that's what we're all about. It's not, oh, I'm doing something wrong, or I need to do something different. It's, I'm looking for ways to improve.
Yeah, spot on. And, we'll probably talk about this many times over the next 5 weeks, and maybe even into the summer. But Katelynn, honestly, one of the things that I admire most about you is your willingness to have the conversations. You and I see eye to eye on a lot of things, but there are some things that we don't necessarily agree on. And I know that because we've had the conversations. And I love that, the fact that we can agree to sit around a table and talk about the taboo topics. I saw Rob Breyer, for example, posted in the comments, how do I get my teachers to have this conversation? And that's hopefully what people will take away from a lot of our talks today, is how can you have these conversations? How can you ask the questions just to get people to start the conversations? It's not about reaching consensus. It's not about having everybody agree on everything. It's just about opening the door, which will then lead to opening Pandora's box, which will lead to destinies changed and transformation completely happening. Because that's what happened to me. That's exactly what happened to me. I had been teaching for 7 years, thought I had all the answers, thought I had done everything perfectly. Then I went to a conference and met a man whose birthday is actually today, the infamous Rick Wormeli. People that don't know Rick Wormeli online, it looks like Rick Wormeli, but Rick Wormeli changed my mind by metaphorically smacking me across the face by asking a ton of questions that I didn't have answers to, questions that caused me to reflect, questions that caused me to like cower and say, oh my gosh, what have I done wrong? And then it sent me on this journey for the last 14 years of discovery, trying to find answers. And that's another piece I want people to recognize. It has been 14 years since that slapping of the face until I got the understanding that I have now, which still has a lot of holes in it. So, Katelynn, you are about that age when I had my awakening. So God bless you for finding your awakening earlier. What happened for you? Did you just walk into your classroom one day and say, I have all the answers, and like the halo appeared above your head, or what happened?
Yes. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, okay.
No, I'm joking. So it was actually, I was in a class with a professor of mine that I so respect. His name's Dr. Todd Reeves. And I was doing work for my master's, and he was teaching a class on assessment. And all of the things that he was having us do were about reliability, validity, fairness, really digging into like what an assessment is supposed to do. And then the end project that we had to do was a literature brief on a topic of our choice. And I was like, okay, well, I'm curious in learning more about like grading then, because like I am super hard. Like I love grades. I think they're great. I wanted to get out of the elementary school and go to the middle school because I wanted my ABCDF. I wanted my percentages. It was super black and white, super concrete. Nobody could argue with me. A grade was a grade, and I knew what I was doing, and it was perfect. I was dead set, like that was the way to do it. And so in this class, I started doing this literature brief, and I'm like reading all this research. And one of the papers that I talk about often that I think is such a great resource to even start with if you're doing any research on grading, it's called 100 or a Century's Worth of Grading Research by Brookhart. And there's a ton of other authors on it as well, but it is a phenomenal piece of literature that really walks through how grading has evolved and where it began and why it is where it is now. So it's a great way to kind of build your background. And as I was reading this paper, I was also trying to grade my students' homework because, and I was grading this assignment that was worth 127 points. I, to this day, don't know why it was 127 points. I don't really know what the point of that was. I do remember thinking to myself, like, can't I just add another 3 so it's like a nice round 130? Like I could just
because
do
130 is a round number for doing math, especially when you're converting those points to percentages. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense, Katelynn. Yeah.
I was like, if I just add like 3 more points for like complete sentences or something, like that'll work. And that's when I thought to myself, I was like, oh my God, if I can just add 3 points for nothing, this is stupid. Like this isn't doing what I wanted to do at all. And that was where I kind of just had this moment of, oh, like what I'm doing isn't working. What I'm doing is actually pretty dumb. Like maybe I should stop grading things for 127 points when I don't even really know what I'm grading right now. Like it was just this light bulb moment. And that was the one assignment, and reading that paper at the same time, it was like the perfect storm of things that happened. I just kind of thought to myself, like, okay, I need to do something about this. Like I need to do something different, because Dave, you know me, I'm not the kind of person that's just like, oh, I've learned this thing. Like I think things should be different. Like, cool. Okay. Moving on. Like I was like, okay, things should be different. I'm going to do it.
All the books now and go. Yes.
Exactly. Like what can I do? So that was kind of where it began.
Wow, that's cool. And Rob Breyer throws out here 130 points. Wow. And it's an amazing point. And I'm going to pause for a second here, because this is actually going to be one of the topics we cover. I think it's next week. We talk about measuring and how do you determine what to measure and the point values and all of that, which will probably be part of our conversation today, because we can have that conversation about 130 points. We could also have that conversation about 13 points or 3 points or 430 points. It's all just arbitrary math that we're throwing out there. It is a good conversation to have. And people, if you want to have that conversation, We will. So just stay with us in the next couple of weeks. And maybe now's the time for me just to tell people where we're going over the next few weeks so they know what we're going to be covering. And it'll probably help me stay focused on the focus too. So today, soon, we will start talking grades and what do they mean. And I'm going to challenge people in a second. We're going to be putting some questions out to you that we're going to be encouraging you to just be open, real, honest, and share your thoughts, opinions, beliefs in the comments. So be ready for that. Next week, the conversation is measure what matters. Measure what matters. So how do you determine what measurement to use? And it's not going to be a course on statistics. We're not going to be talking standard deviations and means and all that. We might, but it's not going to be a math class. So don't worry. We're also in 3 weeks going to have the conversation about jumping through zeros and deadlines. I cannot wait for that one. On the 28th, I feel like I'm getting more and more excited every time I read one of these. Formative versus summative. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we just had that conversation the other day. And I'm fired up for that one. Then we actually have a week where people are going to get some homework. We're going to ask them to do some things and then come back to us the following week. But we're going to do a lot of Q&A and just problem solving. And people are going to be bringing us their actual questions that we're going to try to address. We might even bring some people on from time to time to ask their questions directly to us and maybe push back against some of the things that we've shared. So that's the plan. Did that sum it up? Do you feel ready to roll now?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Now I'm like, I'm fired up. I'm chomping at the bit. Let's go.
So here, I guess Rebecca asked a great question. She said, "Can we just do all the weeks right now? Do you have any plans tonight? Can we just next 5 hours? Let's go, and then let Chris Mattson do some splicing and just." I don't know. We're wearing the same outfits next week. You'll know what happened. There is that temptation. I don't know that we're going to be able to stop in 40 minutes. So, yeah, we'll see what we can do. All right. You ready to start talking just the big overview of grading now? I think we've done the intro and ready to roll. Okay. So grades. I asked the question, what are they? Somebody else asked me the question today on Instagram. They said, why does this even matter? Why is this a big deal? And I'll be very honest with you. That would have been the same question I would have asked 13 or 14 years ago. Who cares? It's a grade book. I'm writing numbers in a grade book and giving kids A's and B's. Who cares? Why are you wasting my time talking about grades? Obviously, some people like the conversation. I love the conversation now because of all the doors it opens up. But why are we even talking about this, Katelynn? Grades, who cares?
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you started with that question because here's the deal with grades. You have to ask yourself what you want your classroom to be about. What do you want your district to be about? What do you want your school to be about? Do you want it to be about a transaction? Do you want your students to be walking into classrooms every day, figuring out how many points they need to get that letter grade that they want? Do you want your conversations with families to be about how many points their students need to get the letter grade that they want to see on that report card? Do you want your conversations with your administrators to be about the number of students in your classes that are getting that certain letter, that are at that certain level? Or do you want your conversations, your students, your families to be focused on learning, progress, and growth? That's why it matters. Because as soon as you attach value to something, like a grade, like a point value, whether it's going to be a random sticker with a unicorn, whether it's going to be a 4, whether it's going to be 127, as soon as you attach a value to something, it is about that value. It is no longer about learning. And I just saw somebody comment that grades are motivating. Love that you brought that up because here we go. Motivation research is my thing, folks. I love motivation research.
I'm going to find out who Facebook user was because I feel like they just put the quarter in you, as we say about Chad. Do you want to go there now?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to go there.
I'm going to sit back. There. You go ahead.
So,
sorry, Facebook user.
Grades are motivating because they're an extrinsic motivation. It is a reward. They do something to get the reward. They are not intrinsic motivation. You are not creating motivation for learning. If you want students to be motivated to learn because you want them to learn, then you need to build intrinsic motivation. You need to really help your students focus on learning and not on getting something for that learning. It's the same thing with behavior. If you continuously give kids candy for reading a book, they're going to read a book to get candy, not because they want to read a book. If you want students to focus on learning in your classroom, you need to build that intrinsic motivation. So I tell this story a lot because when COVID hit last year, I was fortunate to be in a school and in a district where I had a completely gradeless classroom. I did not give grades until the very end of the quarter, and I'm glad to talk about that at any time. It was fantastic and I loved it. My students were not stressed out about how many points they were earning. They were not coming in every day asking me for extra credit and what they needed to do to get an A. We were not talking about that. We were talking about learning. We were talking about growth. We were talking about what they were doing in their reading and writing lives that we needed to work on to improve. We were talking about a piece of writing that they did and where they were at and what they were struggling with. And I wasn't the only one talking. My students were too. They could tell me what they knew and didn't know. And then when everything shut down and we went fully remote, my students were not the ones that were not doing their work because it wasn't graded anymore. We were given a state mandate to get rid of grades completely. My kids were still turning in all the assignments that I gave because grades were not their motivation. They knew that doing assignments in my class was to help them grow and to help them learn and to get feedback. Yeah. It wasn't because they were going to earn some arbitrary amount of points or a sticker or a star or a check mark.
So good. And I'm going to chime in right now. So first of all, I love all the questions flowing through right now. And I promise people before I clear everything off in a half hour, I'm going to be capturing all of these so we can make sure that every single question is addressed. But I do want to carry this point forward a little bit more because I feel like, number one, you're fired up about it. And I know that there's a lot of other people that have had this question. And this is a question that I've wrestled with a lot throughout my career and even as a kid, because the irony of the two of us being the ones talking about this, you said you were a good student. You knew how to play school very, very well. You wanted your A's, you wanted that GPA, you wanted the bumper sticker on the back of the car, all the things. I was that student too. I've told you before, back in third grade, I was designated as a gifted student. Every single year I was chasing that 4.0, did everything I could for the grade. So I think it was Laura that posted this. I think it was Facebook user was Laura, who said grades are motivation. Yes, grades are motivation for a grade. They are. They are a motivation for a grade. Does not equate to motivation for learning. They might be a great motivator for compliance. Compliance does not equate to learning. And what we're talking about now to this point is what is the purpose of a grade? I'll go back to Rick Wormley, who his most infamous, his most notorious, however you want to frame it, quote is, grades are communication, not compensation. When we use grades as compensation, we're using them as a carrot and a stick, not as a means to communicate progress. And that's the struggle. You know, I see this all the time. I saw this all the time when I was a building administrator. When I would entertain parent-teacher conferences. I would sit down along with a teacher and a parent and watch the conversation was happening. I've seen this as a parent when I go to parent-teacher conferences. When parent-teacher conferences are devoted around explaining the grade, it tells me that the grade did not explain the progress because we required a conversation to explain the grade. A grade is simply an arbitrary symbol until we define meaning to it. You said whether we use A, B, C's, 1, 2, 3s. I feel like we need the Jackson 5 playing behind us right now. A, B, C, whatever. Or sticker charts, unicorns, thumbs up, thumbs down, fist bumps, hugs. All of those things are motivators for behaviors, not necessarily communicators of progress. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about having some sort of methodology to communicate learning and progress, not necessarily compliance and behaviors. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's exactly it. And I feel like too, when I talk about my gradeless classroom, I always get the question like, well, then how did parents know where students were at? How did families know what they were learning? How did the kids know what they were learning? And this is what I tell people. I didn't use grades to do that. I still communicated where my students were. I still communicated their levels of understanding at different things. I just didn't use A, B, C, D, F, 95%. I just didn't use that method to do it. Yeah. because that is so transactional. It's so compensation based that we can't eliminate it anymore. That system is so tied to what we assign value to. When we have students assign value to themselves, even through that system,
Yeah.
we can't use it anymore. So to answer like that kind of question, or to kind of address that vein, everyone still knew where they were.
Yeah.
Families knew where they were. Kids knew where they were. It just wasn't using a percentage to do it.
Yeah. And again, I feel like Pandora's box is being opened right now. So I'm going to dip my toe into the box and close it quickly and remind people, we got 5 weeks, people. This is going to be so exciting. Like the questions about retakes and redos, and for a quote unquote better grade, I want to highlight the idea of a better grade. And I'm also going to go back to a comment, I think it was Rebecca said early on, about sometimes my kids won't even do assignments if they're not worth enough points. What we are talking about right now is trying to reduce subjectivity and the arbitrariness of grades and making them more objective. A grade should never be better or worse, good or bad. They should be a reflection of a point in time. If we're saying that grades are going up or down, or that like when we start talking about how many points is enough points for a kid to do an assignment, what if every single one of your assignments was worth 100 points? Is that enough? If that's not enough, do we make them all worth 1,000? What about 10,000? What about 1 million points? Like, what is the right number of points to make something valuable? We should not be assigning things to kids unless we can say it is valuable for us to determine next steps. If it doesn't have value to us to determine where a kid is, if it's not quality evidence of progress, don't waste their time. Don't waste your time, because it's still going to take you time to grade something worth 5 points or 500 points. Who cares the number of points? But that's next week. So I'm not going to go there. Not going to go there. Yeah.
I love it.
So let's bring us back to this whole idea of grades. Yeah, and Rob Breyer, you're right. 127 points. That sounds right. That's the magic number. Let's just make everything 127. So if anybody walks away with anything from this, that's the secret. Make everything with 127 points, and you are good to go. But I guess it gets to the point of the matter. Like, what is the point of a grade? I know I have a definition for one. I have a definition for grades. Do you have a definition that you work if somebody traps you in an elevator and says, Katelynn, then what is a grade? What's the purpose? What's your go-to?
So I would say my go-to is really similar to what you just kind of explained. A grade is a communication of a student's progress. But to be really specific about it, it's academic progress only. When you are communicating a grade in an academic content area, you are communicating a student's level of ability, level of proficiency, level of whatever you want to call it. You are communicating academic skill.
Yeah.
Where is that student at this point in time? And that's my answer.
Yeah, that's good. And my definition of what is a grade, it is an arbitrary symbol, shorthand feedback, if you will, for feedback you should have already provided. That's all it is. It's a shorthand way to sum up everything. It's the Cliff Notes of your feedback. But that is only valuable if people know what that Cliff Notes represent, if they know what that arbitrary symbol means. And again, I'm not necessarily going to go down that path right now. But there are so many things that oftentimes get woven into our grades. We can talk about behaviors, work ethics, but I think one of the biggest contributors, one of the biggest roadblocks and stumbling blocks we get into is this idea of time. The arbitrariness of time and timelines that we attach to grades. Somebody put in the comment that one of the struggles they're facing right now is that kids won't do assignments right now because they're not part of this marking period, which goes back to what you said, is that a grade is a reflection of right now. It's evidence reflecting learning that has happened or that we have evidence of right now. When we arbitrarily say that we're going to be collecting evidence over the mythical 10 weeks, and then we're going to come up with some big aggregate mystical other symbol to represent all the learning that took place over a mystical 10 weeks, and we tell kids that you can turn things up until this arbitrary date of 10 weeks from now, we do ourselves a disservice. Because then we've lost that timely feedback. We've lost all mechanisms of saying that it's all about the moment and collecting quality evidence. But again, that's a conversation for next week. I think next week's going to be fun, by the way. I think it is.
Yeah, I'm ready. Well, I think too, the other thing, and I read this somewhere and it always has kind of stuck with me, a grade, the way that they're currently used right now, is just how close that student got to that particular teacher's idea of a good student. And
values,
so,
yes.
like, that is where we kind of get into one of our favorite conversations is, what do you value?
Yeah.
What are your values in your classroom? Because if you're all about the compliance, if that's what you're looking for, is your students to do exactly what you just said, then that's what your grade is going to reflect. It's going to reflect how closely the students have matched what you believe a good student should be like.
Yes, yes, yes. and that is why this is one of those taboo topics in a staff meeting. If you were to, one of the reasons that you and I get asked to have these conversations with a lot of people in a lot of places like this, even online, is because these are conversations that they can be dangerous to have in your own school unless you are strategic on how you have the conversation, unless you have good norms and protocols in place. Because the conversation about grades, it is not a mathematical conversation. It is not a conversation about means and standard deviations. It is a conversation about values. It's a conversation about what is important to you versus what's important to me, and how do I reflect that in the feedback I give kids and to parents. And for teachers, if you disagree with that in any way, shape, or form, anytime you have a parent that's disagreeing with a grade you gave, it is not because they think you did the math wrong. It's because they think your values are misaligned to their values. That's the conversation. It is a conversation about values. So what we're talking about today is trying to limit that as much as possible, or at least own those, put those on the table, acknowledge the values, and then have the conversation about providing objective feedback that you and the student can do something about. So
yes.
Whew. All right, on that. So can we do our first real interactive thing with our group? I'm going to ask the people 2 questions. The first question is kind of a softball, just to try to get people fired up. But be ready. You might have to type a little bit. Okay? Is that fair? I'm curious to see how many people actually take us up on this, but hopefully we'll have a few people that play along. The question's a simple one. I want you to imagine if your school does this great. If not, imagine that you are in a school that uses what most people refer to as a traditional grading scale, A, B, C, D, F, or E, something along those lines. Some pluses and minuses thrown in there. If you use rubrics and 1, 2, 3, 4s or stickers, just imagine back when you were in a school and you got those A, B, C, D, Fs, or Es. The question I have for you, please, if you don't mind, in the comments, I need a definition. What does an A- represent? Go. And I'll sit here in silence and just watch the comments, because that's going to make great podcasting when this thing gets repurposed.
Okay,
what is
so
an A-?
I love this question. I can't wait to see what kinds of answers we get for this question.
You know, what I honestly anticipate is a lot of or ... A lot of I don't know. I was hoping you were going to say define a grade, or give me an easy one. Tell me what an A is. And I see good enough, almost mastered. Those are interesting.
Those are
working really hard, but not excelling. Okay, so keep on typing if you want to, because I'm going to give you the second question right now. For those of you that are playing along, I just asked, what's the definition of an A-? So the next question is, give me the definition of a B+. Go. And if you are looking at your thing saying, how do I just cut and paste what I just wrote? Feel free. So I just went A- and now B+.
Yeah.
Okay, that I'm reading. I'm trying to read along right now, working really hard but not excelling, that you almost got an A. Okay. In my class, it means they did it and they care. I have no idea. I think it's just for the GPAs. A- used to mean that you were smart, but not liked. Ooh. Boom.
Yes.
Okay. Bree doesn't like B+, almost the mastered. So it's interesting. So
almost mastered.
Yeah.
That's
so
amazing.
that is amazing, because his last response, for those of you that don't know, Rob Breyer, I appreciate you so much, my friend. You are playing along so well. His response for the A- was almost mastered. Now for the B+, he said almost mastered. And if I were to keep going down the list to like a B and then a B-, we're going to have a lot of almost of the almost of the almost of the almost, right? So now I have a question for you. So Katelynn, let's play along. You and I are both sitting in class. You just got the A-, I got the B+ on the same assignment. We are in a class where the teacher says retakes and redos are allowed. We both look at our grades. What do you have to do differently that I have to do different? What's the difference here? What are we doing differently next?
Honestly, like I wouldn't really know. Like
teacher's
I would
a sexist. The teacher's a sexist. She likes girls more. That's what it is.
Yep. That's got to be it.
Hmm.
That's got to be it.
So somebody else wrote a B+ in math would mean that I did pretty good. Does a B mean I did pretty good? Does an A- mean I did pretty good? Huh. What did you do
pretty good on? Everything?
It wasn't spelling. It wasn't spelling, no.
Yeah. Are you
No.
just pretty good at math? Or are you like pretty good at certain things in math?
Well, I think I missed question 4. So I just need to do question 4 again.
Right. Question number 4.
But you got half points for question 4. Why did you get half credit and I missed all of it? I don't get it.
Oh, I don't know either. Maybe I put the units and you didn't.
Oh. But I would only know that if I actually was allowed to look at your paper. Oh, I can't do that. That'd be cheating. Or if the teacher told me what you got on the grade. Huh. Interesting. But anyway, I mean, we could play this game all along, but let's get rid of the ABCs. Let's get away with that one. I got a different question. Ready for this one? Okay. I want you don't have to necessarily put this in the comments. Just lock it into your brain, especially if you're listening to this in a rewind, like when you're driving your car on the podcast or something like that, and you're listening. So in a lot of states, as we're recording this, it is the start of testing season. When we say testing season, we're talking about the big test that the suits make us give, right? And we'll have a conversation about that in a second. The kids will take their little tests. You'll get the results in July or August. And some of your kids will get a designation of proficient, right? So I want you to think in your head, what is the definition of proficient for whatever grade level you teach? And then I want to ask you, you have that definition? In a lot of other states, there's another designation above proficient, which is called advanced or exceeded or something along those lines. So, Katelynn, you teach 5th or 6th grade. Mm-hmm. So a proficient 6th grader. What is the difference between a proficient 6th grader and an advanced 5th grader?
So Whoa. That's right. Like you would think that they would be similar, right?
You would think so, but are they?
You would think that would be a similar thing, but is it? Like,
and so here's the thing. We're going through this little exercise just to highlight the idea that grades are arbitrary symbols. Whether you put a designation of proficient, exceeded, a 3, a 4, an A, a B, again, your unicorn sticker, it is an arbitrary measure. And the fact that everybody that's played along has given us different answers so far, and these are all people that are somewhat interested in the conversation about grading, reminds us that everybody that assigns a grade has a different value matrix, and everybody that is reading the grade interprets it differently as well. When I get an A-, it means something different than if you get an A-. When my parents see an A-, they're going to see something completely different as well. And that's the struggle. That's the struggle. Whew. Wow, I feel like we've been going. Yeah. But as we go through this, I mean, I got so many questions. Number one is, how do we solve that? We didn't create this mess. Is there not an answer? And we just sit here and say, oh, well, all we did was uncover a major mess, people. Good luck. You got 3 months to fix it.
Right. Okay. So I think that's really important, is to be like, okay, so what do we do to solve this? And it's important to take a moment and say, like, okay, you're not going to be able to solve it in your classroom tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, and that's cool. Like, it's not going to be an overnight fix, because again, this is super entrenched, and this is so many years in the works, hundreds and hundreds of years in the works at this point, that we have so much work to do. The point is that we need to start doing the work. And that starts by asking these questions, which is why, like, it's going to be uncomfortable. Like, you can also, like, when Dave puts me on the spot like that, like, yeah, I'm over here, like, I'm supposed to be doing this live, and he puts me on the spot, and I'm like, what do I say? Like, it's definitely uncomfortable to stop for a minute and think, like, okay, yes, that's a problem. Like, what is an advanced 5th grader compared to a proficient 6th grader? Like, what is the answer to that? It's important, though, that we're asking that question. That's the piece that we have to remember. And that's why we keep talking about focusing on the focus, because that is how you do it. You start by asking those questions and then taking steps, action steps to get there. So if you are in a fully traditional system right now that is still using ABCDF, traditional grading scale, points, percentages, all that good stuff, There are going to be different steps that you take to get to something that is more aligned with your values and with what we want to do in education going forward. If you're someone who's like, okay, but I use that proficient thing that he just got all, like he just put on the spot, that Dave just said, like, oh, well, what does that even mean? That's okay if you're thinking to yourself, like, I thought I was doing this right, and now I don't know what to do. Like, that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean that you're doing something harmful. What it means is that you have room to grow. You have questions that you get to ask and words that you get to reflect on, things that you get to go take and learn and research and then do, because that's the piece of it. You ask the questions, you do the work.
That's it.
Like, now I'm going to go find out what an advanced 5th grader and proficient 6th grader have in common.
I feel like I've gone to the Church of Katelynn, and I just want to keep preaching and saying amen, because you say so many things that I feel like we could just run with in 1,000 directions. And the thing I want to focus in on is the thing you said at the very start of this. It was, you're not going to fix it. And I think one of the things that we need to make sure that we are addressing is we all have a different idea of what it is. What is it that needs to be fixed? Again, the it is not just get rid of A, B, C's, D's, F's. If you get rid of A, B, C's, D's, F's and go to 1, 2, 3, 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, again, or your unicorn stickers, all you're doing is transferring one arbitrary symbol for another. That is not it. One of the things that I am super passionate about, one of the things that I get fired up about, one of the reasons I love this conversation is because I hate how we use grades as label making machines in schools. I feel like we put kids into so many little boxes and compartments by the labels that we give them that limits their destinies, that limits their potential in so many capacities. Even people that started off in school as gifted or honor roll, those designations can limit a student. The students start thinking, I have to just play the game of school. That means I can't be creative and innovative. If you start telling a student that they are a C student or a D student or a B student, a proficient student, an advanced student, whatever labels we assign to kids based off of their compliance and their behaviors can limit their ability to chase their dreams. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it. So the conversation that I have is constantly poking that bear, is how can we limit the labels that we assign to kids? And one of the label making machines we use, points, percentages, zeros, grades, all of those things are part of this conversation.
Well, and you think about it too, like when you're a kid that has consistently gotten D's in math, and you walk into a classroom and you hear, okay, it's not about that anymore. That's not our focus this year. We're not talking about grades. It's not about earning points. We're here to learn. You then have this, it's almost like freeing. Like, imagine that you are a D student and you're now walking into a classroom where the teacher is telling you, we're here to learn. I'm not assigning labels. I'm not putting that on you. You immediately have motivation to try, because it's not about getting straight D's. And also, if you're talking about playing the game of school, which is what grades do, like, the game is rigged, folks. The game is rigged. It is rigged for a certain group of people with a certain background and certain access. It is a rigged game from the beginning. And I'm sorry, because that's a whole other can of worms.
Well, here's the reality. Both of us, we're educators, right? We love education. We both work in public schools. We love public education. But the reality is our schools do a great job of training up the next generation of teachers. We do a great job of saying, if you want to be just like me, do what I did. And we are great at that. But that's not our charge. That's not our task. Our task is to open up doors, to open up opportunities, to allow kids to go anywhere they want. And so one of the things that you'll hear me preaching about a lot is this idea of, again, limiting labels. Yeah, that's a big one. Providing feedback. But more importantly than that, all assessment, all grading needs to point to what can be and what will be, not what was. And that's what we do. We spend a lot of time identifying what was instead of focusing on what is and what we are going to do next. If your grades don't tell you what to do next, if all they do is tell you what the kid did wrong, That's a mindset shift that we need to approach. And we need to have that conversation first.
Definitely. I would say too, like I've seen a lot of action in the comments about like getting people on board, especially secondary teachers. And y'all, I feel it. Like I teach middle school. I talk to secondary teachers all the time. And I agree with you. Secondary teachers tend to hold hard on to their grades. They love them. It is the thing. We love our little grade books. They're our little Bibles. We don't want to give them up. We love them. I would challenge you to start asking that question. What does your grading do? What do your grades communicate? What do you want them to do? Like, that is the point where you start to shift the thinking. What do you want it to do? Not what it's doing now, but where could it go?
Yeah. We've talked a lot about how grades do this sort and select thing with kids. I guess just another reflective question for our educators that are watching. So you took a risk and you went gradeless, or you were forced to go gradeless, but you went that route. A question for everybody else that's watching. So right now, your grades, they do sort and select. Good, bad, or ugly, they are sorting kids by what we might describe as good kids, bad kids, smart kids, struggling kids, whatever, however the sort and select mechanism works, sorting and selecting. Imagine if in your classroom next year, you went gradeless. Do you think you'd still be able to sort and select in your head who fit into which category? Or do you need the grades to do that? And that's just something for you to reflect on, because this might shock some people, but we're not necessarily going to have the conversation and try to push people to say, don't provide feedback to kids. Don't give grades. That's not necessarily our angle. That is part of a conversation that I'm willing to have with people, but that's not what we're pushing. We're not saying you have to go gradeless, just eliminate all grades from your classroom, and that's going to be the answer. That would be upheaval and anarchy, and you would have a lot of fights on your hand. That probably would not be the focus for you to focus on. But it's a good conversation to have with yourself of what would it look like.
Definitely. And I do want to say too, like going gradeless in a classroom, if there's people that want to talk more about that, like I am always happy to have those conversations, because I am in a secondary school. I did still have to give a quarter grade. Yeah. So I came up with an entire, for GPAs, obviously, because the GPA question is always the question. So I'm always happy to work with people, talk with people about different systems that you can put in place to answer that question. And I will tell you, the system that I found, that I used, that I tweaked all year long, was one that I loved, because it empowered my learners to talk about their learning and to take a truly active role, driver's seat role in their GPA, in their quarter grade in my class. And that to me, like, was a way to work within that system to still address that GPA need, because we can't get rid of it. And so I came up with a way that worked, and I worked with a bunch of people on it, and it's awesome. So I'm always willing to share that with people anytime.
Yeah, it's so good. And I would challenge people, if you're just looking for a conversation starter with some of your peers, a great conversation starter might not even be going to your peers tomorrow and saying, oh my gosh, guess what I'm thinking? You could say, I listened to a couple crazy people last night online, and what are your thoughts on this? And let them argue about what we said. And that's totally cool. And then you can kind of read the room and insert your own thoughts where necessary, just to get the conversation going wherever you go. And today, I know we didn't necessarily give a whole lot of tactical and practical, as Ray Hewitt would say, answers for what to do next. What we're trying to do, though, is just explore the big concept and to let you know that this is not as simple as, again, ABC, 1, 2, 3. That's not going to be the solution. That's not what we're arguing for. We're arguing for a lot of reform in a lot of areas. Whichever domino you want to start pushing over first is completely up to you. But over the next 5 weeks, we are going to be pushing over some dominoes and then also helping you pick them up. We will have some clear guidance on what we think and our thoughts and next steps. So can I just real quick, Katelynn, again, preview where we're going over the next couple of weeks, and maybe even just give a few snippets of what we might talk about within that theme? Is that okay?
Yes, and I'm going to jump in.
Okay, yes, please. So the first one was the next week is measuring what matters. Talking about how do you identify the priorities and the standards that you should be focusing on, all of that. Do you have any thoughts that you want to just leave us with real quick on that?
So I'm really excited for that particular topic, because it's going to address a lot of the questions that we kept getting. And it's going to be a way that we can give some tips, some tricks, some ideas, even suggestions, things to take back about ways to get around or work within the systems you have to be in.
Yes.
Because I will tell you right now, I am a classroom teacher. I've said that like 4 times. So I get it. We don't get to make the decision about not doing grades. That's not something that we get to pick. So when you're working within a system like that, there are ways to to work within it to measure what matters. So I'm really excited for that conversation.
I love that. I want people to recognize that you'll get some things next week that you can actually implement now, like this year. We're not looking at you going and causing mass rebellion in your school, tearing up your student handbooks. If you want to do that, great. Let me know how it goes. But that's not what we're advocating for. We want to give you some things regardless of the system that you work within. You might have a handbook that tells you here is the grading scale, 90 to 100. You will use percentages. You will assign grades every week, all of those things. And that's fine. Because going back to what we said early on, that's actually not the problem. That is not the issue. The symbols you use, the points, the math that's used is not the issue. It's the values and laid within it. And that's what we're going to try to unpack and give you some strategies to move on from that. Then in 2 weeks, the topic is jumping through zeros and deadlines. Can I go first on this one?
Mm-hmm.
And just give people a little snippet? I actually do not have a problem with zeros. I'll just leave that, and I'll explain why later on. But yeah.
And I, secret, do not have a problem with deadlines.
What? Okay, I can't wait to hear that convo. All right, cool. So that's April 21st, 2 weeks. April 28th, formative versus summative. If I were to put like a heart around something, this is my big green heart. Formative versus summative. People, this is going to be the one that I think we're probably going to disrupt a lot of what you do, probably more than any other conversation that we have. Do you agree?
Oh, most definitely. And with that one too, that's where I'm excited to share some of the things that I even do in my classroom, like give you actual tactical, practical things that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
That I can share with people. So I'm looking forward to that one too.
Awesome. And then we'll come back together on May 12th, answering live Q&A. Amazing questions like you're asking here today. Holly Stewart sent us a ton of awesome questions on Twitter today, asking questions like, how do I do this if I still have a traditional grade book? Can I marry what you guys believe with that? Guess what, Holly? We're going to answer that. And yes, you can. You can do all of this, whether you have an amazing administrator that walks on water, or if you have an administrator that walks around with a ruler and smacks it on kids' desks. You can do this if your school board is in your classroom every single day, or whether or not you have complete autonomy to teach class outside. We're going to give you tricks and tips that you can use no matter where you are.
Definitely. And I just want to say this too, because I can understand where people are at, where they're like, okay, but I don't have tenure. Like I'm scared. I don't want to push too hard. I don't want to poke that bear. And I get it. I'm non-tenured. I'm new in my district. I am a classroom teacher. I am I need to make money. We all do. And so it is really important to make sure that you are aligning your values with what you're doing. Because when you are aligning your values with what you're doing, you can go out there and make that disruption, because it is on us. We absolutely have a role to play in making this change. It absolutely is our job to ask questions, to push, to poke the bear, to make sure that we're challenging the systems that we have to work within that don't work. I say this all the time, but one of my least favorite things that I hear said in education is, okay, well, like, just close your door and do what's best for kids. Just like, you know what you're doing, so close your door and do what's best for kids. No, open your door, do what's best for kids, and then go tell everybody else how well it's going, how much research you have to back it up, and how they should try it too. Because it's not just about the kids in your classroom. We all work within this public education system that we can change. We can make a difference within. We have to. We can. We got this.
You know what is so cool about everything that you just said, and even the fact that this is a scary conversation for people, is I think it truly, all of that, the fear in people about having this conversation, I think confirms the importance of the conversation. If this were just a conversation about silly little ABCs in a grade book, people wouldn't care. They'd say, I'll go talk to my grade level partners, my colleagues about the arbitrary symbols in the book. Who cares? But we all know that it's a scary conversation because it is a conversation about values. And it's an important conversation to have. So know that you're going to be supported. Know that we're going to be standing right beside you for the next month plus. I mean, we are with you for the length of your journey. Don't think your journey is going to be done in 4 weeks. It's not. And with the end of 4 weeks, we're hoping that you are inspired to try a couple things, to experiment before the end of the year so that you can just launch this big time whenever you're ready, maybe tomorrow, and take some chances, learn some things along the way. Katelynn, any final thoughts from you?
Ask those questions, folks, and poke the bear.
Boom. I love it. All right, everybody. So with that, we have to, I'm seeing the clock. We are at our hour, and that's all they gave us. Unless, I don't know if anybody else is here that can pull the plug on us. If we just kept going, would they even know? Otherwise, we'll be back next week, same time, 7 real time, 6 fake time. 7 Eastern. A standard's only standard for standard. We're doing Eastern Standard Time. 7 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 o'clock Chicago time, Central Time. Next Wednesday, we'll continue this conversation, really diving into how do you measure all this, talking a little bit about the math without going into statistics, and talking about really those tactical steps that a lot of people are asking questions about. So come back next week. Join us. We will see you soon. We'll see you somewhere. You got this, guys.